Happy Sunday and welcome back to the Uncorked Mailbag. It's been a hot second since I've done one of these. Unfortunately, I have been very busy with work, so I haven't had a ton of time. We've had a lot of stuff going on. I'll give you about a 30-second, maybe less, recap of what I've been up to the past few months, and then we'll get into your questions. But I've been in Auburn and in Tuscaloosa for games. I went to Knoxville to cover the Alabama-Tennessee game, and then basketball season started. We were on the call for both of Alabama's exhibition games. One was in Birmingham, so right on the street, and the other one was in Huntsville. And now the basketball regular season's here, so we've had a combination of basketball, football. Where have I not been is the real question. I missed y'all, and I'm very happy to be back. And these questions this week were awesome. I got so many questions. I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, but there were some repeat questions. So hopefully I will be able to hit on the majority of what y'all were asking, but thanks for submitting your questions. And if you are confused as to how to do that, you can send them to me on social media. You can comment on this video if you have a question that you already want to ask the next one. But yeah, that's where I've been. That's what I've been up to. I'm so happy to be back, and let's get started. The hot topic, obviously, the past few days has been the Auburn flight altercation. I think I got 3 or 4 questions about this. What happened on the plane? What happened on the plane? And the story since has come out, so everyone's probably pretty caught up on that if I had to guess. Basically, Jahki, Hudson got into a little tiff on the plane, and it made the pilot uncomfortable enough that they diverted the flight, went back to Auburn, landed. Hudson and Jahki Howard both stayed in Auburn and did not play versus Houston last night, obviously. But that's, I guess, all I'll really say about that. No details have come out about if there's going to be a long-term punishment involved. They obviously had at least a 1-game suspension, but I don't want to start speculating on stuff because I don't think anyone really knows the details of what's going to be happening. But my takeaway from that was, one, I thought it was very comical how the players celebrated after their win over Houston. They were literally running around the court acting like they were airplanes, which I thought was kind of funny because the news was everywhere. The story was everywhere. And one thing I did hear is that it sounds like it got blown a little bit out of proportion. Obviously, it's a serious issue when something like that happens on a moving airplane or an airplane that's sitting still. It doesn't matter. But I think the severity of the actual altercation, it sounds like wasn't quite as bad as what people are making it seem, but that's what happens on social media, and you can avoid those types of stories if it's getting, blown up. You can avoid that if the fight never happens. So I'm sure lessons have been learned, and I'm sure there will be a stern talking to for those two guys. But the celebration after the game honestly made me laugh because it was literally on the Today Show. It was everywhere. The story was everywhere. And they kind of took that and run with it. But, and after the game when Dylan Cardwell was on Instagram Live and said, "You put a bunch of dogs on a plane, what else do you expect to happen?" That made me laugh too.
When you lock a bunch of dogs up on a plane, what did you expect to happen? What did you expect to happen?
My biggest takeaway from that happening was they battled through distractions, off-court distractions, and played a hell of a game versus Houston, the number 1 ranked team according to Kenpom. And I read or heard a stat, I believe it was Brad Law that was talking about last year Houston only gave up 74 points twice in the entire season. And those were both games where they were playing on the road. This was a neutral site game, so they say I don't really consider it a neutral site because it was in Houston. It was not at their home court, but it was in Houston, so not neutral site, but considered a neutral site. But they were able to stay focused. They did not let the distraction of all of the media coverage of the plane fight impact the way that they played. And the two guys that sat had a pretty big impact on Auburn's first few games of the season. So that was my takeaway, was bravo, props to y'all, kudos to y'all, kudos to the coaching staff, the players for staying focused, staying ready for the game, and performing that well when there's so much negative media attention swirling around the program ahead of such a big game. So I was very pleased, I guess, very excited to see that they did not let that get in their heads too much. Another question I got asked a couple times was for a score prediction for the Auburn-Houston game. I'm obviously not going to predict the score because the game has already happened. But side note, and very impressive story real quick, Zep Jasper and Charlie 5 do a Auburn basketball show. It's an incredible show. Y'all need to go check it out. It's on the Barn YouTube channel if you haven't watched that yet. But on their Friday show, Zep said, I'll take Auburn by 5. I think he said 5 or 6. But Auburn won by 5, so Zep can see into the future. Zep knows what he's talking about, so go listen to what he has to say along with Charlie 5. But my biggest takeaway from the game was Tahaad Pettiford as a whole. He's coming off a game where he went 0 for 4, and he stayed out of his own head. He did not let that impact his confidence and his ability to play. And this was basically a Tahaad Pettiford coming out party. And it wasn't versus a cupcake opponent. It was versus a very, very good defense in Houston. And the stage was not too big for him. He was hitting his shots. He was making clutch plays when Auburn needed plays to be made. Chad Baker, Mazaraj, and Ibram all really stepped up at the end of the game. So I thought that was very, very impressive considering he's a true freshman. This was his second ever college basketball game. Bravo, Tahaad. Bravo. I hope that he can continue because at the beginning of the season, sometimes you'll have players that seem to be performing super well, and then conference play starts or you start playing a lot more challenging opponents, and things start to look a little shaky. So that has to instill so much confidence in him that he was able to go out and do that. He does not have much experience playing college basketball. He has 2 exhibition games and now 2 regular season games, but I was incredibly, incredibly impressed by his performance. He led the team in scoring with 21 points, so I'm hoping that he just continues to improve. I'm hoping that he continues to have that high level of confidence to take those shots, and I think we'll be sitting pretty. Chris asked what college basketball game I'm looking forward to most this season. I would say the Maui Invitational if I was going because I'm trying to go to Hawaii, but I think a game that's just going to be iconic is the Auburn-Duke game in the SEC ACC Challenge. It is at Cameron Indoor, and Duke is just an iconic basketball school. It's a huge brand, and that's just going to be a fun game. And especially now that Auburn proved to themselves that they can go on the road and they can beat the number 1 ranked team according to Kenpom in Houston. Heck, they can go anywhere and win. So I'm really looking forward to that game just because, Bruce Pearl said it this offseason when the matchups got released. It's an incredible opportunity to play there because of what Duke is in the world of college basketball. Something else that we don't need to overlook is the fact that Auburn and Alabama are the teams that got matched up to play Duke and UNC. It's not Kentucky and Duke and Kentucky and UNC. It's Auburn, Alabama, Duke, and North Carolina. And that says something because a lot of this stuff comes down to, TV ratings, revenue, what's going to get the most eyeballs, and the fact that Auburn and Alabama, they are now gaining so much national attention over the past few years for how strong and competitive their basketball programs have become. So that's just, I don't know, it's crazy. Did anyone think that the state of Alabama would be having this much success in a sport other than football? I don't know, but it's fun as heck to watch. What do you think Auburn's record will be at the end of their non-conference schedule? So I'm going to run through the schedule real quick just so we're all on the same page. So they've played Vermont. They've played Houston. They're obviously sitting 2-0 right now. They'll play Kent State, North Alabama. Then they have the Maui Invitational, which they have the opportunity to play a number of highly ranked and very talented teams. And then they have Iowa State, Duke, Richmond, Ohio State, Georgia State, Purdue. I think they have one other game after that. My prediction has changed, I think, after last night, showing the fight and the, kind of what this team's capable of. They're not going to walk unscathed. They're going to lose a couple of these games. I would say, I think that it would be incredible if they entered SEC play with 3 losses. That might be crazy to say, but this Houston game, this past game, I think was one that a lot of people had marked as an L. And I think that is obviously going to change the view of Auburn moving forward, as it should. It's so much different than football because you can lose games. And we've seen over the past few years that strength of schedule is so important when it comes to seeding for the NCAA tournament, because if you have quad 1 losses, you're really not going to get punished for that. It's not the end of the world if you lose a quad 1 game. Something else that we've realized is scheduling tough non-conference opponents is so beneficial when the end of the year comes around, because then you're not, shocked by what you're seeing in the NCAA tournament. You've played tough opponents. You've maybe already played opponents that you could match up with again in the tournament. And it gets you experience. You're not just winning games. You're not scheduling cupcake games just to get wins on your schedule. You're challenging yourself. You're getting better. You're, figuring out what it's like to play these types of tough opponents. So it's so beneficial. But the sky isn't falling if you drop 1 or 2 or 3 of these games. It's so important to get this, experience and challenge yourself prior to March. So I'll say, I hope that we walk away with 3 or less losses in the non-conference schedule. Is that realistic? Probably not. Shoals guy said, sleeping in on football to stay up and watch basketball. I don't really know if I understand exactly what the question or statement is, but I'm guessing he means, are you kind of, sleeping on football to watch basketball? And no, I'm still paying I watched college football all day yesterday, and this season is so fascinating because it's the first year of the 12-team playoff, and that, shakes things up. You lose a game, you're not screwed for the postseason. So no, I'm not sleeping on football to, focus on basketball. But the thing is with my job, people care a lot about Auburn and Alabama, especially because of some of the players that they have coming back. Mark Sears, Janai Broome are 2 people that are, in talks for National Player of the Year accolades. And people care. We have incredibly talented programs. So I'm not sleeping on football, but I am focusing some on basketball. It's a treat that we have these 2 teams in our state that we cover so heavily for football. And they need the attention for basketball because they're putting the nation on notice. Gabe asked if I think Alabama will make the SEC championship game and potentially the playoffs. So after they beat LSU last night, that is a step in the right direction that they needed. That was being talked about by everyone before the game as a playoff elimination game. But right now, if they make the SEC championship, yes, they're going to be a college football playoff team. But let me just read the top of the SEC standings right now. So Tennessee is 5-1 in the conference, 8-1 overall. Texas A&M is 7-2, 5-1 in the conference. Texas is 8-1, 4-1 in the conference. Georgia is 7-2, 5-2 in SEC play. Ole Miss 8-2, 4-2, and Alabama is 7-2 and 4-2. So the top of the SEC standings right now is crowded, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Well, one of these teams is going to have to lose because Texas A&M, Texas play, so some of them will match up. But winning that game in LSU yesterday, I think I saw something during the broadcast that said if they won that game, that gave them a 74% chance to make the college football playoff, I believe. And I'm expecting them to win out. So, yeah, I think that we'll see them in the college football playoff in the SEC championship game, assuming they don't drop a game that they shouldn't. Ben asked if I think there's any chance that we see Walker White at quarterback. So this is a really fascinating discussion right now because Auburn, at this point, do you make the decision? We're preparing for the future. This year, we're not going to go to a bowl game unless they win out somehow. So do we start letting younger kids get more playing time? And a lot of young guys have gotten significant snaps this season. They've played so many young guys already. But when it comes to quarterback, we actually asked. So Payton Thorne is our NIL player on the next round. And the guys actually asked him last week. They said, has there been any talk internally about giving the nod to one of the younger quarterbacks? Because, at what point do you say we're dedicating the rest of the season to preparing for next year? And Peyton's response was, I haven't heard any talks of that, but that's a question that would be better asked to, the coaching staff. So Wednesday rolls around. This was last Monday. Wednesday rolls around, and during the SEC teleconference, Hugh Freeze gets asked basically the same thing. And I'll read the exact quote of what he responded. All right, so when asked, this is what Hugh Freeze's response was. Payton has played pretty solid, but at the same time, you start thinking big picture. We certainly aren't winning, and so we're debating all of that this week, and we'll continue into next week debating that. Auburn obviously had their second bye week this weekend, so they didn't play. So that does give them an extra week of preparation time if they were to want to make that change. But in terms of it being Walker, I think that it will be Hank before it'll be Walker. I'm not saying that Walker won't play at all, but he has been the scout team quarterback this year, so he hasn't been, running reps in practice with the ones as Payton and Hank have. And Hank, we've seen when Payton has struggled this year, Hank has been the guy to go in. So Hank is going to get playing time before Walker will, and Walker's also redshirting, but he can play. Now, there's 3 games left. He can play, and he won't have to burn his red shirt. But I think that we'd see Hank if they decide to make the change before we'd see Walker, just because, he's been the scout team quarterback this year. So they haven't, really planned on using him a ton. But who knows what decision they'll make. They're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place right now. After Hugh gets fired, who do you want Auburn to pursue as their next head coach? This is a question from Carson. One, Hugh isn't getting fired this year. He's not getting fired this season. And I know as of recently, the narrative that's been floating around is he has a worse record than Brian Harsin did, and so on and so forth. And surface level, he does. That's not a lie. No one's lying. And surface level, that looks horrible. But the thing is, the difference is that Brian Harsin was showing no hope for the future. The man wasn't driving 15 minutes down the road to Auburn High to watch these kids play on a Friday night. He wasn't recruiting. And Hugh Freeze is recruiting his butt off. He is, has commitments from a lot of really, really talented guys in the 2025 class right now, assuming that still holds, which a lot of the recruits have said, I'm locked in. And what I've been hearing when I've asked about this, because it concerns me, I turn around at these games and see a section full of these commits or these guys that Auburn's trying to get to commit. Watching these games, I'm like, good Lord, what is going through their minds right now? But the talk is that in the recruiting lounge after the games, the conversation that's being had between those guys is, look at all those young guys out there making plays, for an SEC team as true freshmen. So they look at it a lot differently than we do as fans. Thank God. And will a few of them, end up not signing? Probably. That happens with every recruiting class. Hugh Freeze is giving us hope for the future. He's giving us something to be positive about in terms of recruiting. And when John Cohen hired him, he said, you got to give me time to get my guys in here. You got to give me time to right the ship. John Cohen's being patient. Now, the concerning thing is Auburn has lost games that they shouldn't have lost in terms of talent on the roster. They've had more talented rosters and lost games. So that's, another question that's being asked is, well, is coaching a problem? So I don't know, there's so many different things that play into this, but he's not going to get fired this year. And I don't even know who I would want them to go after if he got fired. Maybe John Sumrall. He's, a rising name. But I don't even want to answer this question because I don't think he's getting fired this year. And Carson didn't say this year. He just said after Hugh gets fired. But I'm trying to be glass half full, silver lining kind of girl about this situation. I don't want to think about him getting fired because that means that we have another horrible season next year. And then, that's probably when it's time to start flashing the red lights and getting a little bit concerned. But I'm not there yet. Hunter asked what I'm looking most forward to next season besides Deuce Night. This is kind of a blanket statement, I guess, but it has to do with morale. I think something that we've seen a lot this season is the young guys, the freshmen, are the ones that have the confidence. They have the moxie, the killer instinct of, we're going to win this game. I'm going to go out there, I'm going to make that play, and we're going to win this game. Strange enough, it's a lot of the older guys that seem to, drop their heads after a play goes wrong, after a turnover happens. I'm excited for those younger guys to, grow up, get a little older, and start to be the leaders of that team. And I think that some of them have started voicing their opinion more and becoming some of the leaders on this team. because they felt like they had to. I'm excited about, this next recruiting class to come in just as a whole. And I think the vibe around the facility might change a little bit. Because these guys, they want to win. They want to win football games. They want to do whatever they can. And I don't think that the types of players that we have coming in are going to be, the kind of guys that drop a pass or miss a tackle and pout about it. I'll Be On a Budget asked if I think Auburn has a chance of ruining Alabama's postseason hopes if LSU doesn't get to it first. Again, these questions were submitted prior to the game. LSU obviously did not get to it first. They got their butts kicked in their home stadium. And, no. Honestly, no. I haven't seen something this year that makes me feel confident that they can go into a hostile road environment in Tuscaloosa and pull off an upset. They've shown sparks of really good football, but a complete game and consistent complete games just has not been strung together yet. I have no reason to believe that Auburn is going to go to Bryant-Denny Stadium, Nick Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium, whatever the name is now, and beat Alabama. No. Weird things happen in the Iron Bowl. If it was in Auburn, then I might give us a better chance of doing that. But it's in Tuscaloosa. It's Kalen DeBoer's first Iron Bowl, and they're going to be hyped up with postseason hopes and dreams still alive. They're not going to be messing around. It's a rivalry, so they're going to want to win the game badly anyway. So no, I really don't think so. I don't think so. And I don't know if anyone out there thinks that Auburn's going to roll up into Tuscaloosa and beat this team, but you never know. You never know. Crazy things happen in the Iron Bowl. Auburn also hasn't won in Tuscaloosa since 2010, I don't think. So I don't think this year's the year, unfortunately. Tyler said, if you didn't love Auburn, who would your favorite SEC team be? None of them. My thing about my fandom is I have personal connections. I've loved Auburn. I've been a ride or die Auburn fan since I was a small child. And then I graduated from Auburn. So I have connections. And I have a reason that I cheer for that team. I don't have a personal connection or draw to another SEC team. So I don't think I could be as passionate of a fan of another team because it would be forced, it feels like. So I don't know who I would go for. I don't know. I don't think that I would enjoy it as much. I wouldn't have the team that I'm like dying to watch play another game and dying to go watch in person just for entertainment wise. Obviously for work, I love going to all the games, but from a perspective of fandom, I couldn't do it. I simply could not do it. That kind of snowballs into the next question, my favorite NFL team. I don't have one. Or I say that lightly. I haven't had one. Last year I was trying to figure out what team I should go for because it's fun on Sundays to have a team to root for. But I didn't have a personal connection to one. I didn't have a reason that I cheer for one until this year. So I'm from Michigan originally. My family, they're all Lions fans, Detroit Lions fans. And my favorite, I don't want to say all-time favorite, but one of my all-time favorite college football players was Terrion Arnold. I love him so much, which is very contradicting because I'm a huge Auburn fan, but he was our NIL player last year alongside Jalen Miller and Tyler Booker. And he was such a great interview, had such a great personality. I just love him. I love him. And the Lions drafted him. So I'm like, I love Terrion. My family's Lions fans. I'm from Michigan. So we might be onto something here. I'm not a diehard by any means, but if I had to pick one, it would be the Lions. All right, that is going to do it for the return of the Uncorked Mailbag. Thank you all so much for submitting so many great questions. And make sure that you're subscribed. Make sure that you have your alerts set because we're not on a normal schedule right now. So I can't really tell you when I'm going to be releasing the next one just because my schedule is a little hectic with football and basketball. So I'm going to be rolling them out as I have time, but make sure you're subscribed. Make sure that your alerts are set. And if you already have a question that you'd like to ask for the next one, leave it in the comments here and I'll be sure to get to them.